Okay, so Tyrion, we've got Tyrion 1 and Tyrion 2. So where were these read? Tyrion 2 was a reading at Worldcon, I think, originally. And Tyrion 1, EasterCon in April 2012. So it's a slightly weird set of chapters because you can't read the second one. But anyway, in Tyrion 1, we're basically seeing the build up to the Battle of Marine. So Tyrion's playing, is it Cybas or Sivas with Bran Ben? And they're waiting for battle. They're speculating about whether Dany will return. I think they all think that she will. And just commenting, as we now know after the Princess and the Queen, that having 3 dragons in the battle just will be absolutely chaotic and horrific, really. There has been a sighting of a fleet, which Bran Ben isn't taking seriously, but we know, of course, that he should. And Tyrion is trying to persuade them to switch sides a second time towards Dany, and that they should deliver the kidnapped Dario and pretend it was a plan to infiltrate the opposition all along. And he acknowledges that Dany might be suspicious, but he assumes that she'll be very grateful because he will portray himself as the man who's killed Tywin Lannister and try and forge an alliance that way and win her confidence. And as the chapter ends, Jorah confirms that the Iron Fleet has arrived. And then in Tyrion 2, which obviously I haven't read because it kind of doesn't exist, which is a bit weird, apparently the second sons are off to war and they're still backing the Younkish, but they kind of think they're probably going to be on the losing side. And Tyrion's basically getting suited up with Penny, and he's reminiscing about the Battle of the Green Fork and the Blackwater. And apparently Penny dares to kiss him, and he lashes out. And he's sort of reminded a bit of Shay. There's all sorts of weird psychological stuff going on, which I think is going to be quite interesting to see. He pities the Younkish, who are innocent of how vicious the Greyjoys can be, and sees Viserion and Regal join the attack. And the second sons are prevaricating. They don't know which side to join, but ultimately they declare for Dany. And I think we can argue about, is it significant that when Ser Jorah kills a man, a piece, the White Knight, the White Dragon piece falls at Tyrion's feet. So people have read that this is going to be significant of maybe the fall of Dany. Despite the fact that, she now seems to have all the pieces on her side. So there you go.
It sounded to me like, Tyrion might be riding Viserion in the near future. That's, that's the one white dragon we know of.
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah. I'll be interested to see how sort of Tyrion and Victarion face off, because they've both just arrived in Meereen and they're both going to be seeking the affections of Dany, I guess. Tyrion kind of wants to position himself as one of her chief counselors, and Victarion obviously wants to try and forge a marriage alliance with her, or sort of win her.
I think Tyrion might fare better because she tends to take on counselors, especially those from Westeros. But people who present themselves as her lovers rarely fare well unless they're sort of hot bad boys, right? So Victarion's not going to fall into that category.
But Victarion doesn't come empty-handed, right? He brings a huge fleet, lot of cargo capacity to take all their people to Westeros. So Tyrion actually doesn't bring anything.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily. When you present yourself as a lover or a potential marriage alliance, Dany hasn't got good record in looking at people objectively and saying, "Oh wow, he has a fleet, he has this and that." She just tends to go by how hot they are.
I think by Dany's standards, I think she probably will like Victarion. It's like Drogo. He's like Dario.
He's not gonna be that charming though. Come on. I don't know if she'll be that taken with old Victarion, but I guess you may make a case for that, Vic.
But he doesn't have the looks, right?
Well, it's not like Danny's going to have a say. He has the dragon horn. Okay, so here's my very absurd crackpot theory. So for the dragon horn to work, you kind of have to lock the dragon horn to your control by doing some blood thing. Makaro mentions this in one of the last books. So, and I think the Valerians did this, and that's why the dragons are more attached to the Valerians. I mean, the first guy who used the dragon horn put his blood on it. And so it's easier for somebody with a Valerian blood, even though it's not the exact blood now, but it has some of the DNA through. So I'm thinking once Victarion does his thing with the dragon horn and everything with his blood, the dragons are now also going to be more attached to Greyjoys. It doesn't have to be Victarion, but any Greyjoy will also now have enough influence on a dragon.
Yeah, that's crackpot.
Yeah, it's
yes.
Yeah, it's based on nothing.
Because there has to be a reason why dragons are attached to Valerians, right? And I don't buy that the Valerians are half dragons and stuff like that. It's probably good for propaganda and stuff like that. But some magic has been done with Valerian blood and the Horn, and that's why the dragons obey Valerians.
Well, one thing I'm wondering if the horn actually does what Euron has claims it does. I mean, we don't know what Euron has in store for Victarion. It could be some really dark magic that he's going to unleash. But I was wondering if indeed it does have the ability to control dragons, if Tyrion might try to steal it from Victarion, because we know that. I mean, Tyrion even mentions in this chapter that there's, he knows about the savagery of the Ironborn. There is this animosity between the Lannisters and the Greyjoys, especially over the burning of Lannisport, which Tyrion witnessed as a young child, and he remembers seeing the sailors burning. So I'm wondering if that sort of dynastic rivalry or this animosity will sort of play out in Meereen. Especially due to the fact that Tywin never really sort of sought vengeance for that horrible slight against the Lannisters. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And because, Tywin is obviously one of the most vengeful lords in Westeros, but he never really extracted that blood debt from the Greyjoy. So I'm wondering if Tyrion might sort of carry on that feud.
Yeah. It's just that Tyrion is not really a Lannister. I mean, he's been disowned by the families and everything, so he has no obligation to kind of do stuff for the Lannister house anymore.
Well, no, he considers himself Lord of Casterly Rock, doesn't he? Because that's what he's basing his alliance with the Second Sons on, that he's going to be the Lord of Casterly Rock.
I think he wants to claim what's his. He's been so psychologically broken in Dance with Dragons, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what kind of a state he is, whether he is vengeful or we don't really get a clear sense of that from that first Tyrion chapter. And I think he's all about coming back to Westeros in glory and taking what's his. Unusually, he doesn't want the crown, but he does want Casterly Rock.
Yeah.
It's like Victarion sees himself as the heir of Iron Islands, but he is not, and he is also seeking vengeance against Euron. Theon is the same way about Casterly Rock. He sees himself as the heir to Casterly Rock, and he wants to be seated. So maybe these two can actually collaborate with each other and say, hey, if you help me take Casterly Rock, I'll help you take Iron Islands in turn, because these two guys are not actually representatives of their respective realms, right? They are rogues, rebels.
Well, Victarion's not a rebel, is he? He's doing what he's commanded to do.
Yeah, but he's looking for opportunity to turn on Euron, right? So
sure, yeah.
He fancies the idea of being a rebel.
That's
yeah.
In his own mind, he's like Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, if Theon says, I'm going to attack Iron Islands, Victorion's going to be, very good. Do you want a ride? I'll take you there.
Yeah, the guy's a total sleazebag.
Yeah. The other thing I picked up on this chapter is the line that Tyrion knows the Pale Mare is riding, but he wants to live. Like, I think that's sort of a bit of a change from what we saw in Book 5, this really sort of deep pit of self-loathing and depression, almost suicidal depression in Book 5. But it seems to be towards the end of Book 5 and possibly in these chapters, this sense of not wanting to die, of wanting to claim his sort of right to live, I guess. And you do see a bit more of the Tyrion kind of wittiness and even playfulness, but in a very sort of vicious way, obviously.
Absolutely.
The fact that he's trying to convince the Second Sons to join Dany, I mean, he's obviously back in sort of in his old state of being actively involved in getting things to his advantage.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
He's back in the game.
He's playing the game once again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I misunderstood that part. I thought the Second Sons, when they let Tyrion join and Jorah join, I think they turned their cloaks immediately. I didn't think that they were still on the Yankish side. They were just looking for an opportune time to actually turn on them. But I was surprised reading these chapters that Tyrion was still trying to convince them to turn.
No, they were still with Yonkai at that point, yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised about that.
It is interesting that the Second Sons are just like so treacherous. They're constantly stalling a decision throughout the whole 2 chapters. Like the leadership sort of envoys keep coming up from the beach where the Iron Men are just decimating them, demanding an answer, and they just keep saying, "Oh no, we'll just wait till Brown Van Flums come back. Oh, we don't know who you are." I know, they're just so like such terrible. Like, why would you hire any sellsword company? They're just so fickle and treacherous.
Well, the Stormcrows were actually pretty loyal until Dario killed the leaders.
Yeah. And I mean, the Golden Company pride themselves, right, on never having switched sides up until now. I mean, yeah, it's not good business practice, certainly.
Well, even if the Second Sons go back to Dany won't trust them again, right? She definitely seemed to trust Brown Ben Plum more than the rest of them, and his betrayal hurt her quite a lot. And
I know.
is she
So
just
is this
going
going to
to
be
forgive
one of
them
the
if
betrayals, the
they
prophecy?
switch over to her side?
I know this
I don't
notion
know.
that he can tell Danny, oh, it was all a ruse to learn the Younkish secrets. It's just idiotic. Like Danny's going to see through that immediately. The only way,
Yeah.
the only way they might be able to get back in her good graces is if they rescue her 3 hostages, including Dario.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I feel like people were comparing Dany with Rhaenys, and I think Dany's is very different from Rhaenys. Rhaenys, when she heard of the betrayal, she went total berserk and stuff, right? But Dany's biggest betrayal was Mary Master and then later Jorah, and the way she handled both of them, I thought was very well. Not with Mary Master, of course, she actually burned her, but with Jorah, she was very civil. She let him go, right? She only exiled him. And that's the biggest betrayal. I think Brown Ben Prum's betrayal is okay, but it's not in the same level
Yeah,
as
I don't think
Jorah.
Yeah,
it counts as one of the 3 betrayals.
it feels kind of minor, yeah.
Yeah, the only biggest betrayal could be, I don't know, Drogon turning on her. No,
Well,
Barristan maybe.
have you guys heard the
Doesn't
last?
Dany send Jorah and Barristan on a suicide mission when she doesn't even
Yeah.
know if they're actually against her?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Although
I
that's
think
kind
she's
of
pretty vengeful.
to prove their loyalty, I guess. But have you guys heard the last episode of a podcast of Ice and Fire?
Yeah.
Because
Not yet,
they
no.
The
sort of,
Houses
well,
of
I won't spoil it, but they I think it's Kate.
Oh,
Ironic.
there was one? Okay.
I think it was Katie who puts up the one of the possible betrayers, the betrayer of love, which I thought was really interesting.